The sun had barely risen over the city, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, but Jamal Thompson was already wide awake. He stretched his arms above his head, his bones still heavy with sleep, before rolling out of bed. His small bedroom was neat, a single bed, a wooden desk covered in schoolbooks, and a photo of him and his mom on the wall. She was smiling in the picture, her arms wrapped around his shoulders, but lately, that smile had been harder to see. Jamal tiptoed past his mother's room, careful not to wake her. She had been coughing all night again, the sound rough and painful, like something was scratching at her lungs. The doctor had said she needed medicine, but medicine cost money they didn't have. That was why Jamal had taken the job at the Golden Plate, the fanciest restaurant in town. He was only 12, but he was tall for his age, and the manager had agreed to let him work as a busboy, clearing tables and refilling water glasses. It wasn't much, but every dollar helped. He pulled on his uniform, a crisp white shirt and black pants, and tightened the apron around his waist. His reflection in the mirror looked tired, but he forced a small smile. Just a few more hours, he told himself. Then I can come home and help Mom. The streets were quiet as Jamal walked to work, his sneakers scuffing against the pavement. He passed the bakery, where the warm smell of fresh bread made his stomach growl, but he didn't stop. He'd eat later, maybe a sandwich from the kitchen if the chefs were feeling generous. When he reached the Golden Plate, the morning staff was already bustling around. The restaurant was all polished wood and sparkling chandeliers, the kind of place where rich people came to show off their jewelry and talk about things like stocks and vacations. Jamal didn't understand half of what they said, but he knew how to nod politely and stay out of the way. Jamal, stop daydreaming and wipe down table 6. Mr. Harris, the manager, barked from across the room. Yes, sir. Jamal grabbed a cloth and hurried over, his hands moving quickly over the smooth surface of the table. He liked the work, even if it was hard. There was something satisfying about making things clean and orderly. The lunch rush came and went, a blur of clattering plates and murmured orders. Jamal's feet ached, and his arms were sore from carrying heavy trays, but he didn't complain. He just kept working, smiling at customers, and refilling glasses without being asked. Then, just as the dinner crowd was starting to arrive, he walked in. Mr. Vanderbilt. Everyone in the city knew the name. He was a billionaire, the kind of man who owned skyscrapers and private jets. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Jamal's entire apartment, and his shoes gleamed like they'd never touched dirt. But what caught Jamal's eye wasn't the suit or the shoes, it was the ring on his finger. A thick gold band with a deep blue stone in the center. Jamal froze. He knew that ring. His mother had one just like it. She kept it in a little velvet box under her bed, taking it out only on special occasions. She had told him it was a gift from a kind employer years ago, something to remember her hard work by. Before he could stop himself, Jamal blurted out, "My mom has the same ring." The restaurant seemed to go silent. Mr. Vanderbilt's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Jamal's face. For a second, the billionaire just stared, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his face twisted into something cold and furious. "Impossible," he hissed. And just like that, the moment was over. Mr. Vanderbilt threw his napkin onto the table, stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled over, and stormed out of the restaurant without another word. Jamal stood there, his heart pounding. What had just happened? And why did Mr. Vanderbilt look so afraid? The restaurant hummed with uneasy silence after Mr. Vanderbilt's sudden exit. All eyes turned toward Jamal, who stood frozen beside the billionaire's abandoned table, his hands still clutching the water pitcher. The clinking of silverware and murmured conversations had stopped, replaced by curious stares and hushed whispers. Even Mr. Harris, the usually stern manager, looked stunned, his mouth slightly open as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Jamal's face burned under the attention. He wasn't used to being noticed. Not like this. Usually, he was just the quiet boy who cleared plates and refilled glasses, invisible to the wealthy customers who barely glanced his way. But now, he could feel their gazes digging into him, full of questions he didn't have answers to. "Jamal," Mr. Harris finally said, his voice low and tense. "My office. Now." Jamal swallowed hard and followed, his legs feeling like they were made of lead. The walk to the back of the restaurant seemed to take forever. Every step made his stomach twist tighter. Had he done something wrong? All he'd said was that his mom had a ring like Mr. Vanderbilt's. Was that really so strange? The manager's office was small and cramped, with stacks of papers and receipts covering most of the desk. Mr. Harris shut the door behind them with a sharp click, then turned to face Jamal, crossing his arms. "What," he said slowly, "was that?" Jamal fidgeted with the hem of his apron. I just told him my mom has a ring like his. That's all." Mr. Harris sighed, rubbing his temples. "Jamal, do you have any idea who that was?" "That was Lawrence Vanderbilt, one of the richest men in the city." "You don't just blurt things out to people like that." Jamal looked down at his shoes. "I didn't mean to upset him. I just recognized the ring." Mr. Harris studied him for a long moment, then sighed again, this time with less frustration and more exhaustion. "Look, kid, I'm not mad at you, but you need to be careful. Men like Vanderbilt, they don't like surprises. And they definitely don't like being told that some waiter's mother has the same jewelry as them." Jamal nodded, though he didn't really understand. Why would Mr. Vanderbilt care about something like that? Unless there was a reason it mattered. The thought settled in Jamal's chest like a stone. His mom had told him the ring was a gift from an old employer. What if... No. He shook his head slightly. His mom would never lie about something like that. She was the most honest person he knew. "Just be more careful next time," Mr. Harris said, waving a hand. "Go finish your shift." Jamal nodded again and slipped out of the office, his mind racing. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. He moved through his tasks, mechanically wiping tables, stacking dishes, refilling water glasses, but his thoughts were miles away. When his shift finally ended, he didn't linger like he sometimes did to chat with the kitchen staff or sneak a leftover roll. Instead, he hurried out the door, the cool night air hitting his face as he walked quickly toward home. His mom was sitting at their small kitchen table when he arrived, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. She looked up when he came in, her tired face brightening a little. "Hey, baby, how was work?" Jamal hesitated, then sat down across from her. "Mom," he said slowly, "remember that ring you have? The gold one with the blue stone?" His mom's smile faltered. She set her tea down carefully. "Yeah, why? Does it?" Jamal twisted his fingers together. "Does it have anything to do with a man named Vanderbilt?" For a second, his mom didn't move. Then, very quietly, she said, "Where did you hear that name?" Jamal told her everything about Mr. Vanderbilt coming into the restaurant, about the ring, about how the man had reacted when Jamal mentioned her. As he spoke, his mom's face changed. Her shoulders tensed, and her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly around her cup. When Jamal finished, she took a deep breath, like she was steadying herself. "I used to work for him," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "Years ago, before you were born. I cleaned his house." Jamal leaned forward. "And the ring?" His mom looked down at her hands. "It was a gift from his wife. She gave one to all the staff before she passed away. A thank you for our hard work." Jamal frowned. "Then why did he get so mad when I said you had one?" His mom was quiet for a long time. Then she met his eyes, and what Jamal saw there made his stomach drop. "Because," she said softly, "a few months after she died, his ring went missing, and he accused me of stealing it." Jamal's breath caught. "But you didn't, right?" "Of course not," his mom said, her voice sharp with hurt. "I would never. But he didn't believe me. He fired me on the spot. Called the police. They searched our apartment, questioned me for hours." She trailed off, shaking her head. "In the end, they let me go. No proof. But the damage was done. After that, no one would hire me to clean. That's why I had to take night shifts at the factory. Why my lungs are so bad now." Jamal stared at her, his heart pounding. All these years, he'd never known. All these years, his mom had carried this injustice and never said a word. And now Mr. Vanderbilt was back. And he had the ring. Which meant one thing: someone had lied. And Jamal was going to find out who. The apartment felt too small after Jamal's mother shared her secret. The air hung thick with unspoken words, the weight of years-old injustice pressing down on them both. Jamal sat motionless at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing the grooves in the worn wood as he tried to make sense of everything. His mother's story didn't add up, not because she was lying, but because somewhere along the way, the truth had been twisted. Someone had stolen that ring. Someone had let his mother take the blame. And now, years later, Mr. Vanderbilt was wearing it like nothing had ever happened. His mother reached across the table, her calloused hands covering his. "Jamal," she said softly, "I don't want you tangled up in this. That man has power, money. People listen to him. We're just us." Jamal looked down at their hands, hers rough from years of scrubbing floors and lifting heavy boxes. His still smooth but already learning the same hard work. He thought about the way Mr. Vanderbilt had stormed out of the restaurant, the way his face had darkened at the mention of the ring. That wasn't just anger, that was fear. And Jamal knew, deep in his bones, that fear like that only came when someone had something to hide. "I can't just let it go, Mom," he said quietly. "He lied about you." His mother's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. She knew that tone. It was the same one she used when she insisted on working double shifts despite her cough, the same stubbornness that had kept food on their table all these years. The next morning, Jamal woke before dawn, his mind already racing. He needed proof. He needed to find out what really happened to that ring. But how? He was just a kid who served fancy people their salads and wiped crumbs off their tables. Then it hit him. Detective Rosa. She came into the Golden Plate sometimes not as a customer, but to chat with Mr. Harris about security stuff. She was different from the other cops Jamal had seen. She actually listened when people talked. Once, she'd even helped one of the dishwashers fill out paperwork when his wallet got stolen. Maybe she'd listen to Jamal, too. He got to work early, his stomach in knots as he waited for his shift to start. The restaurant was quiet, the morning sunlight slanting through the windows as the staff prepped for the day. Jamal kept glancing at the door, hoping to see Detective Rosa's familiar face. Finally, just as the lunch crowd was starting to trickle in, she walked in. Tall, with her badge clipped to her belt and her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She nodded at Mr. Harris before scanning the room. Her eyes landed on Jamal, and for a second he froze. Then he took a deep breath and walked over. "Detective Rosa?" His voice came out smaller than he wanted. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Yeah, I need to talk to you about something important." She studied him for a moment, then nodded toward a quiet corner near the kitchen. "All right, let's talk." Jamal's hands shook as he told her everything about his mom, about the ring, about Mr. Vanderbilt's reaction. Detective Rosa listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Jamal finished, she let out a slow breath. "That's a serious accusation, Jamal," she said. "You understand that, right? Accusing a man like Vanderbilt of lying, that's not something to do lightly." Jamal met her eyes. "I know, but my mom didn't steal anything. And if she didn't, then someone else did. And Mr. Vanderbilt knows." Detective Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a small notebook. "All right, let's see what we can find out." For the rest of the day, Jamal's nerves buzzed under his skin. Every time the restaurant door opened, he looked up, half expecting Mr. Vanderbilt to storm back in. But the hours passed without incident, and by the time his shift ended, Detective Rosa was waiting for him outside. "I did some digging," she said, keeping her voice low as they walked. "Turns out Vanderbilt's wife gave out several of those rings before she died, to staff she trusted. Your mom wasn't the only one." Jamal's pulse jumped. "So where are the others?" "That's the thing." Detective Rosa's mouth tightened. "No one knows. The staff who got them either quit or were fired not long after Mrs. Vanderbilt passed. And the rings? Gone. Except for the one Vanderbilt is wearing now." Jamal's mind raced. "So he took them back?" But why? Detective Rosa hesitated, then sighed. Money, probably. Those rings are worth a fortune. But without proof, it's just a theory. Jamal clenched his fists. There has to be proof somewhere. Yeah, Detective Rosa said. And I think I know where to look. Jamal's heart pounded. Where? The Vanderbilt estate. Specifically, the safe in his study. If he's keeping those rings, that's where they'd be. Jamal stared at her. But we can't just break in. Detective Rosa smirked. Who said anything about breaking in? Vanderbilt's throwing a charity gala there tomorrow night. Half the city's gonna be there, including me. She paused. And if a certain waiter happened to be on the catering staff. Jamal's breath caught. He was in. And tomorrow night he'd find out the truth. The Vanderbilt estate loomed like a castle against the evening sky, its towering gates and manicured hedges whispering of money and power. Jamal adjusted his bow tie borrowed from the catering company's spare uniforms and tried to steady his breathing. The last time he'd worn something this stiff was at his uncle's funeral. Detective Rosa had been right about one thing. Nobody looked twice at the help. The staff entrance was a flurry of white jackets and silver trays, voices calling out orders in clipped, professional tones. Jamal kept his head down, blending into the rhythm of clinking glasses and murmured instructions. His job was simple. Circulate with trays of hors d'oeuvres, smile politely, and most importantly keep his eyes open. But the real plan thrummed beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. At exactly 8:17 p.m., Detective Rosa would cause a distraction near the grand staircase. That would be Jamal's signal to slip away toward the study. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and the low hum of wealthy voices. Jamal moved through the crowd, offering tiny crab cakes and bacon-wrapped dates to women in diamonds and men in tuxedos that cost more than his mother made in a year. His eyes kept darting toward the arched doorway at the far end of the room, the one that led to the private wing of the house. Then he saw him. Mr. Vanderbilt stood near the marble fountain, champagne flute in hand, laughing at something a gray-haired man said. The blue-stoned ring glinted on his finger as he gestured. Jamal's stomach twisted. That ring had cost his mother years of struggle. That ring had stolen her dignity. A crash echoed through the ballroom. Jamal whipped his head around to see Detective Rosa kneeling by the staircase, a shattered champagne flute at her feet, apologizing loudly to a red-faced socialite. Showtime. He ducked behind a potted palm, set his tray on a passing server's stand, and moved toward the arched doorway. The hallway beyond was quieter, the thick carpet swallowing his footsteps. Oil portraits of stern-faced Vanderbilts watched him pass. Third door on the left. The study door was heavier than he expected, the brass knob cool under his sweating palm. Turned silently. Inside, the room smelled of leather and cigar smoke. Moonlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting silver stripes across the mahogany desk. Jamal's pulse roared in his ears as he crossed to the painting behind the desk, a landscape of rolling hills Detective Rosa had said concealed the safe. His fingers brushed the gilded frame. Looking for something? The voice froze Jamal's blood. In the doorway, backlit by hallway light, stood a boy about his age, but where Jamal was all sharp angles and work-rough hands. This boy was soft-edged in a velvet suit, his blonde hair perfectly combed. The resemblance was unmistakable. Ethan Vanderbilt. Jamal's mouth went dry. You're one of the waiters, Ethan said, stepping inside and closing the door with a quiet click. He didn't sound angry. Curious, maybe. This is the second time this week someone's been too interested in my father's study. Jamal's breath hitched. Second time. Ethan walked to the desk, tracing a finger along its edge. Tuesday night, Dad came storming in here around midnight, tore the place apart looking for something. He glanced at Jamal. After some kid at a restaurant mentioned a ring. The air between them crackled with unspoken things. Jamal made a decision. Your dad fired my mom 8 years ago, he said, voice steadier than he felt. Accused her of stealing a ring just like the one he's wearing tonight. Ethan stilled. The blue sapphire. Yeah. Jamal met his eyes. Except she didn't take it. Someone lied. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at him. Then, moving suddenly, he crossed to the bookshelf and pulled down a thick volume of Shakespeare. Behind it, Jamal glimpsed the dull metal of a safe. Ethan hesitated, hand hovering over the dial. If I'm wrong about this, my father will send me to boarding school in Switzerland. Jamal didn't blink. If you're right. The safe clicked open. Inside, on a velvet-lined tray, sat 3 gold rings, each with an identical blue stone. Ethan's face drained of color. These were my mother's. She gave them to her favorite staff before she died. His voice cracked. Dad told me they'd been stolen. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Both boys tensed. Ethan shoved the rings into Jamal's hands and slammed the safe shut just as the doorknob turned. Hide them, he hissed. The door swung open to reveal Mr. Vanderbilt, his face darkening as his eyes landed on Jamal. You! Jamal's fingers closed around the rings in his pocket. And just like that, the game changed. Time seemed to slow as Mr. Vanderbilt stepped into the study, his polished shoes sinking into the plush carpet. The air grew heavy, charged with something dangerous like the moment before lightning strikes. His gaze flicked between Jamal and his son, his expression hardening as he took in their guilty stillness. What? He said, each word sharp as broken glass. Is going on here? Ethan straightened his shoulders. I was just showing him the... Don't. Mr. Vanderbilt cut him off with a raised hand. His eyes never left Jamal. I remember you. The waiter from the restaurant. His lips curled around the word waiter like it left a bad taste in his mouth. Jamal's fingers tightened around the rings in his pocket. The metal was warm against his palm now, the edges pressing into his skin. He forced himself to meet the billionaire's stare. Your son was telling me about your wife, he said carefully. About how she gave rings like yours to people who worked for her. A muscle twitched in Mr. Vanderbilt's jaw. Those rings were stolen. Were they? Jamal's voice didn't shake. He pulled his hand from his pocket, the 3 gold bands catching the light as he held them up. Then why are these in your safe? For a heartbeat, the room was utterly silent. Mr. Vanderbilt's face went pale, then flushed dark red. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched. Give those to me. Jamal didn't move. They weren't stolen. You took them back. The pieces clicked together as he spoke. You fired everyone she gave them to, didn't you? Made up lies so you could get them back. That's enough. Mr. Vanderbilt's voice shook with fury. You have no idea what you're talking about. My wife was ill. She wasn't thinking clearly when she handed out family heirlooms to servants. Ethan made a small, wounded noise. Dad! No. Mr. Vanderbilt whirled on his son. You will not side with some nobody over your own family. Those rings belong to us. Jamal's chest burned. They belonged to the people your wife wanted to have them. He looked at Ethan, whose eyes were wide with dawning horror. She gave them as gifts. Your dad didn't just take them back, he ruined people's lives to do it. Mr. Vanderbilt moved suddenly, snatching the rings from Jamal's hand. Get out, he snarled, before I call security and have you arrested for trespassing and theft. Jamal stood his ground. Call them. He nodded toward Ethan. Ask your son what he saw in that safe. Ask him how many rings were in there. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. 3, Dad. There were 3. Mr. Vanderbilt's grip on the rings tightened. This is none of your concern. It is, Ethan said, louder now. Mom loved those people. She trusted them. And you lied. His breath hitched. You made me think they betrayed her. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across Mr. Vanderbilt's face. He opened his mouth. The study door burst open. Detective Rosa stood in the doorway, her badge glinting under the lights. Mr. Vanderbilt, she said, her tone deceptively calm. We need to talk. Jamal exhaled shakily. The game wasn't over yet. Detective Rosa's entrance shattered the tension like a stone through glass. Mr. Vanderbilt recoiled as if physically struck, the stolen rings still clutched in his white-knuckled grip. His expensive cologne couldn't mask the sudden sweat beating at his temples as the detective stepped fully into the study. Her posture relaxed but her eyes missing nothing. "I believe," she said mildly, "those belong to someone else." The billionaire's throat worked as he glanced between her badge and the damning jewelry in his hand. For the first time since Jamal had met him, Lawrence Vanderbilt looked like what he truly was, a man caught. "This is a misunderstanding," he began, the practiced charm sliding into his voice like oil. "These are family heirlooms that were stolen." Detective Rosa finished, arching one eyebrow. "Funny, because according to the original police reports from 8 years ago, the only stolen ring was the one you accused Mrs. Thompson of taking." She nodded toward Jamal without looking away from Vanderbilt. "Turns out cold cases get real interesting when new evidence surfaces." Ethan made a wounded sound beside his father. "You called the police on Jamal's mom?" His voice cracked like thin ice. "You told me the staff left because they didn't care about Mom after she—" "Enough!" Vanderbilt's roar shook the crystal decanters on the sidebar. His polished facade crumbled completely, revealing something raw and ugly beneath. "You will not question me in my own home. That woman had no right to—" "To what?" Jamal found himself stepping forward, his mother's face burning in his mind. "To keep a gift your wife gave her. To work hard for your family and expect basic decency." His hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "You took more than rings from those people. You took their reputations, their livelihoods." Detective Rosa pulled out her phone, tapping the screen. "Speaking of which, I just emailed the DA copies of the original staff contracts. Seems your wife left very specific instructions about those rings." A hard smile touched her lips. "Legally binding ones." The blood drained from Vanderbilt's face. Ethan stared at his father as if seeing him for the first time. "What does she mean?" Detective Rosa answered instead. "Mrs. Vanderbilt's will stated the rings were unconditional gifts, not loans, not conditional on employment." She tilted her head. "Which means every staff member you fired to reclaim these committed no theft. But you, Mr. Vanderbilt, you committed fraud, theft by deception. And given the value of these pieces—" She whistled low. "That's felony territory." The study's grand clock ticked loudly in the sudden silence. Jamal watched the billionaire's shoulders slump, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured balloon. The mighty Lawrence Vanderbilt, brought low not by police handcuffs or courtroom battles, but by the truth spoken aloud in the one place he'd thought himself untouchable. Ethan turned to Jamal, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry." The apology hung between them, fragile but real. Jamal gave the slightest nod. This wasn't Ethan's fault, just like it hadn't been his mother's. Detective Rosa cleared her throat. "Mr. Vanderbilt, you'll need to come down to the station. We'll be contacting all the affected former staff members, starting with Mrs. Thompson." Her gaze flicked to the rings. "Those are evidence now." Vanderbilt's fingers unclenched reluctantly, the gold bands clinking onto the desk. His voice, when it came, was hollow. "I'll call my lawyer." "Of course." Detective Rosa scooped up the rings, dropping them into an evidence bag with satisfying finality. She nodded to Jamal. "Ready to go?" As they turned to leave, Ethan caught Jamal's sleeve. "Wait." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a business card. "My mom's old assistant runs a foundation now, for workers' rights." He pressed it into Jamal's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Tell your mother. Tell her we'll make this right." Jamal studied the card, then the boy who'd chosen truth over blood. Maybe, just maybe, justice didn't always have to be a battle. Sometimes it could be a hand extended. He pocketed the card and followed Detective Rosa out into the night, where the stars shone brighter than any Vanderbilt chandelier. His mother was waiting. The morning sun painted the Thompson apartment in gold as Jamal sat at their small kitchen table, watching his mother's hands tremble around the steaming cup of tea she held. Her ring sat in the center of the table inside the clear evidence bag Detective Rosa had let them keep until the official investigation concluded. Mrs. Thompson hadn't stopped staring at it since Jamal placed it there, her eyes tracing the familiar curves of the gold band as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. "You should have told me," Jamal said quietly. His mother let out a slow breath, her fingers finally leaving the teacup to brush the edge of the evidence bag. "I wanted to protect you," she murmured. "Men like Vanderbilt, they don't lose. Not ever." Jamal thought of the shattered look on Mr. Vanderbilt's face when Detective Rosa had taken the rings. The way Ethan had refused to meet his father's eyes as they left the estate. This time they did. A knock at the door startled them both. Detective Rosa stood in the hallway, her usual crisp uniform replaced by a softer sweater and jeans. She held a thick envelope in one hand. "Morning," she said, offering a small smile. "Got some updates." Mrs. Thompson stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Are they?" "Charges filed," Detective Rosa confirmed, stepping inside. "Fraud, theft, wrongful termination," the DA's throwing the book at him. She handed the envelope to Jamal's mother. "And this is from the Vanderbilt Family Foundation. Back wages for every year you were blacklisted from housekeeping work. Plus damages." Mrs. Thompson's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Her breath caught at the number on the check. This is more than I made in 10 years. Detective Rosa nodded. "Ethan Vanderbilt insisted on it. Apparently, he's taken over his mother's old charity initiatives." Her gaze flicked to Jamal. "He asked about you. Said to tell you the foundation's starting a new program, legal aid for workers falsely accused by employers." Jamal felt something warm unfold in his chest. Maybe not all Vanderbilts were the same. The detective hesitated, then added, "There's a condition for the money, though." Mrs. Thompson stiffened. "What condition?" Detective Rosa grinned. "You have to take this too." From her pocket, she produced a small velvet box. Inside lay the blue-stoned ring, polished to a shine that caught the morning light. "No strings, just yours." Jamal watched his mother's face crumple as she slid the ring onto her finger for the first time in 8 years. It still fit perfectly. The news vans camped outside the Vanderbilt estate for weeks. The fall of a billionaire made for good headlines, after all. But Jamal didn't pay much attention to the scandal or the court hearings. He was too busy helping his mother pack up their old apartment. The new place had windows that actually opened and a kitchen big enough for 2 people to stand in without bumping elbows. Best of all, it was close to the community college where Mrs. Thompson had enrolled in nursing classes. "All that time cleaning up after sick people," she joked. "Might as well get paid properly for it." Jamal kept working at the Golden Plate, though Mr. Harris had started calling him our celebrity waiter after the local paper ran a story about the boy who helped take down a corrupt tycoon. The other staff treated him differently too, not with jealousy, but with a quiet pride, as if his victory belonged to all of them. On his first day off in weeks, Jamal found himself standing outside a familiar downtown office building. The plaque beside the door read Vanderbilt Family Foundation Workers' Justice Initiative. Ethan met him in the lobby, his designer shoes squeaking on the polished floors as he hurried forward. "You came." Jamal nodded, holding out the business card Ethan had given him. "You said to tell you how to make things right." He took a deep breath. "I think you should meet my mom." The epilogue in the newspaper came 6 months later, buried on page 5 where only the truly interested would find it. Former housekeeper partners with Vanderbilt heir to launch landmark worker protection bill. The photo beneath the headline showed Mrs. Thompson and Ethan standing side by side at a press conference, her ring glinting in the flashbulbs as she shook hands with a state senator. Jamal clipped the article and tucked it into his wallet. Some stories didn't need dramatic endings or grand finales. The best ones just kept going. Did you enjoy Jamal's journey from waiter to justice seeker? Stories like this remind us that even the smallest voices can create big change, but they only get heard if we share them. Subscribe for more tales of courage, fairness, and ordinary kids doing extraordinary things. Because the world needs more stories where the good guys win, and we could all use a reminder that standing up for what's right is always worth it. Subscribe now, your next favorite adventure is just a click away.